Dr. Doyle was the one that came up with this actually. She was like, why don't you just declare a minor? Because NSU won't pay for certificates, apparently, and no one ever told me. They will pay for a second minor. So I had to declare a minor in Homeland Security Emergency Management. Just for them to be able to pay for more. I'm not even getting paid for all of the hours, but 12 is full time. That's way better than 6.
Yeah.
And they were all telling me like, oh no, they've never done this. Never. Like the scholarship was like, yeah, we've never paid for that. And Dean Chavez was like, I've never heard of them not paying for it. Like it was a whole big ordeal. And I finally just had to do that. And my advisor was taking forever just to do anything.
All right, everybody, welcome to class.
Woo.
We are actually here today. Let's move this. Don't want you there. There we go. Okay, over here so I can see it. Okay, so we're a little bit late and the door was locked, but it is open now, and here we are. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people. That's most people. Hopefully, anyone who popped in early will pop back in because I can see that there are a few people who were trying to bounce in and see if anybody else rolls in after that. You may notice that on Blackboard here, I made a couple of changes. And let me move this camera real quick. I'm gonna play with this a little bit, see if I can get it to where it's got a better position. It's just actually faster for me to watch it on Zoom than it is the hardware here. All right, I'm gonna bring this up a little bit, a little bit. Okay, that's about the best I can do, I think, in terms of zooming into the screen. I will share my screen for the time being, but I'll kind of keep that limited since it makes the other image smaller available. Share screen. Share screen. That's screen 2, screen 1. Here we go. All right, so here we are down here. Crime prevention control. Boop. All right. Ooh. I didn't upload those. I didn't make those available. Let's do that then. Show. So those are the recordings from the last couple of classes. Those are available now if you missed anything. Let me make sure I got them open in the other shell too. I had those open. Yeah, that one's open there. Okay, so those are there. Do not forget about, oh, we've already done that. Okay, good. I haven't put any more supplemental stuff out there yet just because I wanted to wait to as you guys are developing projects. So that's gonna be the next thing that we're gonna do is I'll set an assignment in here where it's going to be the beginnings of a literature review on. You'll pick a theory in here related to the crime prevention stuff, or I should say genre maybe would be a better way to put it, because sometimes they use theories, sometimes they argue that they don't. And some of the crime analysis stuff can be a theory. So pick a theory if you want to, topic of interest. Once you have that, we'll work on the introduction and lit review, and I'll put out some stuff for you to read about writing it. A little bit different than other papers. One of the biggest things is in terms of writing it, keep in mind that one, the style of writing kind of thing. Every now and again, we can talk about like, you know, the adjectives kind of things like, yeah, you have that, but also realize that we're talking about ideas more than, you know, anytime you use research, anytime you use that citation, it tells you where you got the research, it shows the backing for it, but you're also identifying that specific idea and how it fits in. But I'll outline that, and I'll probably pop out a little bit more of that in class because you guys seem to like it. The next one will be American Community Survey. That's going to be census data. Basically what that will be is you get to play a little bit with some control variables. Like last time, that first one is your arrest data and some other crime data. The next one I'll have you guys, you know, test out and play around with is the American Community Survey, which is basically like census, but much more frequent, so you can hit all those periods in between. When you get into the research, if you really were to delve into it, you'll see that most of it, what they'll do is they'll use that 1 year, 10 year, 10 year census data to cover that 10-year period, which you can do, but it's better when you start to get closer to what you're actually dealing with, what's really existing in the world, because it's just, you get closer, it's longer. But I'll keep that one kind of short and you guys can have some fun with that. By the time we're done with that, you'll be able to take this and that, and you'll have controls for any project you want to run from qualitative or quantitative side. You'll build out the lit review, depending on what your topic is. Okay, how easy can we gain access to it? Or how do we want to measure it? Let's go do that, and you're up and running. Okay. And that's that. The next thing I need to talk about is probably chapter 4. Let's see, we'll keep it short today since it is Valentine's Day, and I know y'all have better places to be than here, like today. And I do appreciate you taking the time, because I know what that means, and on top of that, you have to wait. So this is not one. That one is. Hopefully this one still works. Okay, so this one is developmental and, no, it just says development. Okay, so develop, mental, and you'd say some of the life course stuff, because we'll talk a little bit about that too. The book actually gets into about halfway through this chapter, they start to make that distinction. So one of the big things to think about related to this is, well, whenever you're dealing with crime, yeah, you're dealing with crime, the incident itself. This is one of those theories, the areas where you start to take a look more at the people involved, the criminality side of it. Here, you're dealing with people. People do this over time. Green. There we go. Actually, I got a better idea. I'll move back where it was. Play with some buttons. There we go. Push some buttons. Okay, so that development happens over time. How much time are we talking about?
Hence,
What do you mean?
what kind of development are we talking about? What do you mean?
Oh, what guys are on your mind?
If you go purely from like, I guess physical stages of development, there's a lot, like, you learn to babble, then you learn to talk, then complex language comes after that, and most kids start walking by the time they're 2 usually.
Yeah, okay, so one thing that we're keying into right here with this whole area is, yeah, human development, whether you're talking psychology, biology, all of that stuff, and there's so much overlap. You can't untether those things. Like, you literally can't untether those things. We're trying to do it in terms of understanding it from a statistical standpoint, but like literally some of these things you can't separate out. If you want the physical stuff for just a minute, it's like, yeah, you need some big milestones there. I don't know what that is, but I don't want to name the stuff. Yeah, the importance of this facet, time and timing. They'll stress it a number of different times in this chapter, and as I was reading it, I felt a lot of sympathy, empathy. Time is always of the essence. Your timing for stuff, some of it is so innate that let me put it this way. Okay. What is the average height in this country?
Male or female?
I don't care.
5.
Maybe 5.
Yeah, so you're somewhere in that 5 foot range to 6 foot range, right? Probably getting closer towards this end, right? Go back 3 generations, just three. How tall are they? And I don't mean like old decrepit aged them. I mean them at their youth, their most vitality, most like the height of the biggest that they're ever gonna be. Not gonna be here. Right? You'll find people who are there, yeah, but the average height back then is you start getting right around here. Real fast. Why is that?
Maybe it's because of how our like eating habits change, or like how our exercise changes. It may change the structure.
Yeah, that's part of it. I don't know, the speakers start getting a little bit wobbly there. Yeah, so that's part of it. You have that, and you have, you know, what are physical requirements? That's gonna be part of it. That's gonna be, that'll be things like muscular build, right? Go back a couple generations, you get farmers, it's like, yeah, everybody's gonna be slim. They're gonna be really muscular in terms of that, because it's just like, yeah, they're working all day, there's no food, because they're making the food kind of thing. But when we're talking about food, it's food. Diet. In the last 100 years, our knowledge about diet and what we actually need massively changed. People grew almost a foot taller in a course of a couple of generations. Like you can literally, I'm trying to remember what year it was. I think it was the 1950s. Could have been earlier than that. But they brought in, it was 3 different classes of people. And when I say classes, I mean, it's like literally high school classes across like a couple 10-year periods. And you literally see the average height of the class go up as this is getting better. However, if I took that same amount of food that the average person ate, say the average height here, and let's say we're not dealing with this aspect at all and just deal with food, time, and just the average person at any point in time. If I feed you the right things, you'll grow and develop the right way, right? If I don't, you won't. This relationship is more important than you know, because if I stop feeding you for, we'll say a month, where your food goes from normal 3 meals a day to scraps, right? Adult, you won't see much. Kid. There. I'll get choked up. Night. Give me a second. Yeah. Here, what you'll see. Play with that time element a little bit. There we go. Starting to get back. This right here and here. There we go. Starting to get where I can talk. That 1 month. You bring all that food back, plus the food that they missed, their terminal height will have been reduced. It will not ever increase. There's a whole lot of stuff like that on the biological side. On the psychological side. Ah, good night. That was horrible. Anyway, like there's biology, that one's really visible, really easy to tell. The psychological side works much the same way, right? That's, I think, that's where you're gonna go with the talking, those types of elements. Those are very tied. There are socialization processes all throughout. And just a small change can have massive effects later in life. If you've ever heard another example, I'm going to use the comic book, but there's real these things are based off. Tarzan. right? You are living, raised in an environment where there are no people. You miss, we'll say, a couple years of talking. You don't learn how to talk, you never will. Those pathways that you're building in your brain won't ever go that way without that closure. The long-term effects of that have been massive. Some of the biggest changes we've seen over the last century, stuff like that. That same principle applies here. When we're dealing with people, when you're dealing with crimes, when you're dealing with the crime development, the development of their criminal pathway. That timing aspect is going to be a huge part of it. What other elements and what they eventually do, it's like we have some ideas, but since there is that socialization process involved, people are so different. Right? How it all fits together and what it actually does is really hard to say. In terms of the overall feel, you'll see that, well, they will still choked up. Good night. Got a whole bunch of nasal stuff going. I lost my train. Basically, what we found out is this, the earlier you get, the better it is. The more that you do, the better it is. The likely, anything is an improvement in most instances, but not always. The general trend is early as possible, and you have to move towards. Some of this stuff, what you'll see is there's deteriorating effects, because what you're dealing with here is you're not just dealing with the developmental side of it, the social side, or that. Right there, that choice. As you develop, this thing is going to have massive implications. Not just that, but if you're really indulged in the psychological side of it, it'd be like how you incorporate it, understand it, and frame it. I'll give you some examples of that. There is no here we go. That framing element. Yeah, a few things going on there. Okay. When the book starts talking about this, it highlights lifelong plasticity. If you ever see that term plasticity, you know what that term means, yes? Okay. Usually whenever you see the term plasticity, you're talking about the brain. It has the ability to not really reshape, but in terms of rewire is probably a good way to do it. You'll commonly see it if you look at anything that studies brain trauma. That plasticity is one of those elements that the younger you are, you have a little bit more of it. And so your ability to bounce back from injuries, that kind of thing, that will come into play.
Can you say that word again?
Plasticity. It looks like it's basically just, it's literally what you think. Plasticity. So another way of looking at it is like plastic, kind of flexible kind of thing, somewhat rigid, like the different areas of your brain do certain things, but you have some ability to rewire it. If you're really getting the biological side, it's like, how much can we rewire it? Unknown. Because what we do and how we think changes its literal physical structure. It's like, there's some really cool stuff there. But at every point we are learning, every point we are changing. So that's both adaptive and it is adaptive and positive, and it's negative. It's both, right? You can go in either direction. Okay. Here it mentions developmental prevention involves scientific research to address the conditions that give rise to antisocial behaviors and crime before the problems arise or before they come entrenched. Okay. So if we're dealing with this time frame here, one of the things to keep in mind is anytime you're dealing with this, the developmental side of things and time. One. Target populations. Okay. So it's over the entire life, but you're gonna see that there's a lot of it that's gonna focus in on juveniles. Again, you're getting back to where that time is of the essence. The earlier you institute some type of intervention, the more likely it is to have a positive effect. Kind of thing. So you're doing juveniles, you're also dealing with sometimes prison population, that kind of stuff. Book kind of highlights they did highlight the issues with that. Yeah, they kind of did. We get more of that in methods, so. Okay. Doing something useful. What do I want to tell you about that? Probably what's best about that next section is what it does. It starts outlining the state of the research in terms of longitudinal studies. You're dealing with this, you're dealing with this. That means your gold standard are going to be longitudinal surveys or studies, because those are the only ones that actually account for that change in time, right? These are the only ones that are going to follow people to see what these things really do, right? You can see it to some degree in the cross-sectional. The longitudinal ones where you're going to get the real proof. They highlight that and they show where, here are a few of the big major studies in it and the general trends. And it is one that's, yeah, you tend to be more positive, and the earlier you are, the more effect it has. Next section. Yeah, this is for more recent generation of interventions. Again, most of this confirmed. Okay. Outline some controls here. And here we go. They start talking about the state of the literature. One noteworthy feature of criminological literature, for example, is that despite a bias towards early prediction and child-focused models, there's considerable interest in prevention programs in primary and high school years. Okay, that's actually a bit of a discussion point. When is the best use of these types of things? Ideally, you get it on that initial side beforehand. Sometimes you're dealing with the recidivism side. Sometimes, in that instance, what you're finding there is that's going to be your, that's what I'm looking for. Not justification for research, but not desire. Oh, good. The need, that's the word I'm looking for. Basically, what you see there is the calling for it, where you start encountering more of the problem behaviors. When I start talking about the actual developmental life course in terms of like what you'll see for juveniles who display certain behaviors by certain ages, again, it's the exact same as this, just in the opposite direction. The earlier that those bad behaviors start getting displayed, whether you're talking, oppositional defiant or whatever, earlier it happens, the more likely it is it's going to lead to criminality. So that's why they have that kind of issue where they highlight, it's like most of it focuses on the kids. That's one. However, more and more call towards adults, well, older adolescents and adults. All right. From there, we already talked about the multidisciplinary nature of this. This is something that stick to the criminal justice literature if you choose this as an area that you're interested in. Why I say that is because, like I said, you've got psychology, you've got biology, you've got education, you've got us, you've got a whole host of areas that can tie into this. There will be considerable overlap in terms of the research, so be carefully given that side. Right here. It's getting you. improvements. Okay, we talked about height, we talked about that. Okay. When it starts going through the different programs on page, what is it, 605, something like that. Let's see, Nurse Family Partnership Research Program led by such and such. David Olds. Example of influential policy relevant early intervention method, cited by criminologists as an exemplar. Research showed that teenage first-time mothers from very disadvantaged backgrounds, regular prenatal and postnatal home visits by trained health professionals can, under some circumstances, have long-term benefits, not only to the mothers, but also their children. That's why I went into that one about the food, because that's one where you don't necessarily have to have ill intent, right? Teenage mother, you're gonna have resource deprivation, you have knowledge deprivation, you're gonna have, life skills issues, and the more you get those resolved, you're gonna need more and more time, program time with somebody to teach you those things. There you go. That's why you see those marked improvements. As you're dealing with those time effects, one of they didn't talk about it in this as much, but it's something to consider if you ever start to delve into the time element, is you have that initial time period, like how quickly will you expect change with these things? They take time, so another aspect we'll talk about is there will be a lag element there where you institute a change, how long does it take for it to take effect? And sometimes you'll want to account for that as you're delving into these things. Okay. The language of risk factors is used to avoid the epistemological and scientific challenges posed by the language of causation. Okay, so talking about causation here, they use risk factors to avoid that because, well, you have all of the methodological issues associated with the large number of cross-sectional studies involved in this. That's part of it. The other part of it is, well, the blame aspect that we can talk about. I think that's not good. It's better to go objective. So that way we can address the issue. Risk factors here, they'll give you, and basically it's here. I'll just give you the list and I'll talk about this. Antisocial behavior, low self-control, hyperactivity, poor ability to plan ahead, low levels of parental supervision, harsh and or inconsistent discipline, maltreatment, parental or sibling offending, and family size, parental attachment, school attachment, basically everything is what they start talking about. Everything that's involved in life. There are aspects of it that can go negative here. We do not require a full understanding of the causal processes in order to do effective prevention work. Okay, put that in there. I wanted to talk about that. Why do you think that they would put that in there? We do not require a full understanding of causal processes in order to do effective prevention work.
Because we don't know all of the causal processes,
Mhm.
nor do we know how influential each of them truly is.
Need to know? Question mark.
So basically, if we did, we'd never prevent anything. We'd never have any prevention efforts at all. So it's almost like a disclaimer, I guess.
Yeah, I like it because it's one of those things that's like that's how you get information on the ground, right?
Right.
How, what is it you need to know? First, you start out with it's like, okay, what is it you need to know? Right there. Who is not really a consequence in here? Where sometimes is. Okay, there. The why and the how, right? Those are important because those establish cause, right? We're not dealing with cause. We're dealing with the fact that it is what it is, and we're trying to affect change. It's one of those things I want you guys to think about. I talk a lot about research because I want you guys thinking about it. One of the things that runs in my mind a lot is, what kinds of thought process were going through people's heads when they come up with wild ideas. If I said something like, Pythagoras, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. It's like, why would you come up with that? What would lead you to that? You know, it's like, I don't know. But basically, what I've come to understand is that a lot of it's playing in shapes, right? Doesn't matter that you need to know a squared plus b squared equals c squared. I'm out in the woods and I'm alone and I need shelter. I need to know stick. You know, I've got an outside and I've got a lean-to right here. I can climb up in here and be out of the rain. I don't need to know that the height of this plus the distance of this is this. But if I build enough of those, I'll realize, hey, there's some weird relationship going on here. And, you know, if I play with these a little bit, like the heights, this ends up getting a little bit longer. And in playing with that, finally somebody who's probably a nerd just started playing with the numbers and saying, what exactly is this damn thing? And the next thing you know, oh, shit, there's a formula. That's the same thing for this at every step. What do you need to know? Well, first, not really anything. We'll start figuring out what is going on. Let's go. And that's very, very functional. And that's kind of the point of the data docs a little bit too. Because once you start doing it, you realize it's like, oh, okay, this is just playing with ideas, the same as I'm playing with ideas whenever I write the literature review. It's not much different. All right. From there. Okay. Developmental prevention with risk-focused prevention. I need to read that for you. I wrote a note here. Eggheads speak for two different things to not equate. Okay. So what here they're talking about is, I'll give you the quote and I'll give you the implication. Farrington, 2007, notes that the approach became enormously popular in the 1990s, which would combine, well, basically equate developmental prevention with those risk assessments, that risk-based stuff, the propensity. You know, what's the likelihood that you're going to do something, right? Because as I make something happen here at this time frame, I'm gonna pre-measure my whatever. A classical experiment, let's say. I got this over here, right? I'm gonna be doing stuff here. I'm also looking out this way, and since I'm gonna be gathering this anyway, if I start using this to predict this, right? You're dealing with the same data set, you're doing it differently. You're doing two different things that are the same. That's like saying the developmental and life force theories, they're similar, but they're not the same thing. Developmental is about the stages. This is about, it sees it more sequentially, right? This one's, there's give and take here. And the timing aspect's part of it, but it's more about the ordering of what happens and where it leads people. I've been here for, I'll let you guys go in a little bit. Okay. We'll talk about that, or we'll talk about, so here they're still clarifying other things. So don't confuse developmental life force, don't confuse development or life force with those risk assessments. And the next thing they talk about here is resilience. Resilience is understood as the ability to respond to adversity in ways that lessen its impact. Okay? Well, when we were talking about this, I said biological, sociological, there's the psychological, there's that framing of it, right? Do a few people go outside and you look at a cloud, you see the same cloud, you see the same thing, right? And then there's always that phrase that some people can find every dark cloud for every silver lining, right? Just two different perspectives on the same thing. You kind of have that going on with some of the stuff. You have to be careful with how they conceptualize risk factors versus protective factors. Sometimes they'll have two separate things. Sometimes they'll base them on a continuum, right? Because one is positive, one is negative. And so you can do that to some degree, but be very careful whenever you do that to align it with the literature, because those things, they'll be established fairly well.
Dr. Hurst,
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Can you rephrase your explanation of like the difference between developmental and life course again?
Yeah. So whenever you start talking about this one, when the book talks about it, I don't want to say it this one, it's the only thing I can kind of think of. It's more along the lines of like rites of passage. It's got to do things like that and how people interact with them and they occur. It's not so much about like, at this age, this thing happens, right? It's not that, by the time you are X number of months old, you're starting to grab certain things in certain ways. Or your reflex is that if I put your foot on this, you'll recognize this, and as you'll pick it up and set it on there, right? That's biology to some degree. Here we don't have that. When are you an adult? I honestly don't know that question. I haven't become one yet. Give me another 10 years. But no, it's like, okay, 2 generations back, you're 12. Right? 1 generation back, 18. Maybe a generation before that could have been 16 sometimes in some places. Our generation, your generation, my generation, are they the same? I don't know. But we'll say that they're 2 different ones, right? Is it the same age across the 2 of us? You got some arguments there, right? When do all of your rights kick in? When can you go out and rent a car? When can you go, I start getting to 21 for a lot of
I
things.
still can't even rent a car, I don't think. I think you have to be 25.
That's right, it's 25 for renting a car. It's 21 for smoking cigarettes.
It's 21 to rent a hotel room.
When my
Well, you can pay for a hotel room, but you can't check in.
Mhm. Yeah, so when my brother was 6 years old, he could ride his bike up to the gas station and buy cigarettes,
Mhm.
right? I didn't do that because by the time I was riding a bike, I was like 12 years old. I had an older brother. I could never get on the bike. He'd throw me before. If he's ever watching this, I still hold that against you. My older brother. I'm serious. I love to do that.
So would you describe developmental as like something that's cannot be really planned out, but life courses are more planned
It-
out?
Kind of, right? So life course would see that as more in line. This one, there's a lot of give and take in. It's like, when would that pivotal moment that kicks you into that pathway or sets you off into it? How are you going to, what is it going to be? Where is it going to be at? And how are you going to respond to it? That kind of thing. The factors that here, whether you're talking about, oh my God, this is one where they really brought in so many theories and stuff that it gets a little cumbersome if I go out too much from that kind of perspective. But, okay, so you're here. When you're becoming, okay, how many friends does it take before you're a member of a deviant group kind of thing, right? When you're a part of that deviant group, when are you actually a part of that deviant group? That's gonna be something that changes for every place. Like, okay, I'm in school, in the school socialization process, they identify the trouble students. And those students, they treat in a very specific way. And it's kind of troubling, right? Every school is gonna be a little bit different. And what identifies that kid as a troubled kid that's going to be punished for being troubled is gonna be different across all those kids, but there's gonna be themes there that are similar, and the timing won't always be the same. Right? And that's kind of what they're getting at here. Life course is a little bit more straightforward. They didn't, I was a little surprised they didn't bring it up in here. I'll show it to you real quick. So like life course, what it deals with is it's more straightforward, just describing this. Let me share the screen so you can see it. Screen 1, boom. We'll go over here, that's gonna be, it's right here, calendar drive. That's gonna be Moffat. Thank you. Boy, it's moving fast. Yeah. And see, what this one was, is they were creating a developmental taxonomy for different types of people. But that one did from the outset, this is one of the earlier ones for this person's life research, but in this is a pivotal piece. Because what it did is it identified, okay, here are the 2 general patterns we see in people. Kids, when they're kids, most of them kind of crap. Yeah, I resemble that one, right? By the time adulthood starts coming near, at some point, people start to wake up and they get out of that. Some people do not, right? Bit more of a path. This one, you're still dealing with the same kind of thing, right? But what they'll emphasize is more of that plasticity, they're more not plasticity, but flexibility. Okay. Conceptualization, let's talk about those things. Okay, prevention, intervention. Here's what they start talking about. Let me get rid of this. We're done with that. Stop. Stop. Yes. Okay. Okay, in the section where it talks about prevention interventions to understand and promote protective factors, knowing when, with whom, and how to configure prevention interventions is key. Yeah. Here it talks about protective factors work by modifying the effects of known risks, while others work in a similar fashion. Inoculation, well, that's what I need to talk about. Inoculation versus sensitization. Those are the two big processes that are going to be something they're going to be focused in on over the next few years. Why? Because we're still trying to figure out what does what, right? What does this for you might do this to me, right? You were exposed to, let's talk about that for a second. No, we won't do that. You're exposed to same low level stress every day, right? That might make you used to it, or it might just add to your stress level, making your life a little bit more worse. Kind of thing. That's sort of what that's getting at. Yeah. What does what? It changes depending on the context, so much so that it's really, really hard to say exactly how it works. And it's very context, or not just context, but incident specific. Okay. It also talks about the different ways that they, when you start looking at some of the prevention efforts, the different target populations. Target pops for prevention. There's a few ways to do it. All. This is an all-inclusive program. Anyone here, everyone here is involved, right? That's going to get your people who are at various levels of risk. It'll also have the widest access in terms of you'll have more people in there than any other one probably. I should get this over this. Other than that, you start getting into, let's see how they classify them. I won't do. Yeah. That was the problem. Where are you targeting your prevention programs, that kind of stuff? You can set it to where it's everyone. You can set it to where you're only focused on those at risk, those who are already showing problem behaviors, right? There's a little bit of give and take there in terms of what it is you're trying to do, because each one of those, just selecting this right here, will have massive implications for what you do. Right? Here, reduce success. Talking about this pathway and how you fall into that criminal path. By the time you get here, how long before you're entrenched into that pathway? That is your pathway. Here, that's kind of a dangerous one. How do you classify at risk? You have a whole bunch of different ways to do that, depending on where you're at. That's going to be very specific. Somewhere between there and here, you'll have those who will look at this and make a decision about kind of help that they get. It's like don't do that. What you'll see here is lower levels of crime, yes, but you'll also see, you know, the amount of expenditure or the effectiveness will decrease because you're hitting people who are at risk. Here, if you're doing it at risk, depending on what you mean by at risk, like you fall into the at risk, that's going to be a whole range of people. And so what kind of range are we talking about? Are we talking about people who are closer this way or closer that way? Right? And so those are all gonna be things that are gonna be built in as you start to delve into this type of topic. If you're interested in it, you start ever doing any assessments of this stuff, because when you start evaluating programs, those are the types of things that you start looking at. Okay, what are your goals? What are your inputs, your target population? What is it that your actions you're taking, your outputs and all that stuff. Okay. There was talking here about IQ gains, cognitive gains for children in some of these programs that were not maintained. It talks about all the basically the different kind of controls that you want to think about if you're going to study this topic. And they go through one by one. One in here stood out to me, IQ. So it talks about the difference between some of the short-term and long-term effects. You'll see the strongest effect sizes, shorter time frames, you'll see the most behavioral changes. And then over time, those things tend to wane in this area rather than you see in the biology stuff. The IQ stuff, that's kind of a talk about a number of things actually. But some of that's math that you get burnt up on that. I think it's popping up on mine, and I don't want to think about that. IQ. No, I won't give you that lesson because you've already had that 100-point IQ bell curve, all that, and how much we could change that in terms of these things is actually very limited in this country. Mostly where you see that you can have the biggest changes in IQ, again, it's going to be food. Literally, it's food again. Okay, family support, you need that. Okay, so it talks about different programs, those different files. I wanted to talk about 1, 2. Trying to figure out how much longer I'll keep you. You guys want to go fast or you want to go long?
It's up to you.
Okay. All right. So as you move through the chapter, it then starts talking about some of the costs associated with this area of crime prevention. Take note of the math involved, how they go about it, because this is what you'll see in terms of the calculations involved. Here, they estimate the number of dollars by combining the cost of the program itself, the benefits of it, and then they also add in things like, okay, what would be the incarceration rates, the food costs, the I said the incarceration rates is going to include food, less medical costs. What are going to be the costs to the victims of these crimes? Those are going to be more economic costs. And you add all those things up together to see what that total could have been. And so any difference between what could have been and what is a savings. Mixed opinions about that, but it is one way to do it. Yeah, that's going to be one of those things that's going to be underlying part of this because the political side is going to be running under it. Be careful whenever you're dealing with these things and the cost benefit stuff, because essentially, if you aren't careful with messaging, you'll end up saying the idea that as long as I'm saving money, this stuff doesn't matter kind of thing. But that's not a good there. Okay. Here's where they get into the theory integration. So after it talks about the longitudinal studies, it asks about how the results were achieved and how this thing actually manifested and how we got to where we were. Because yeah, you're talking about longitudinal studies that will follow people up at 15, 25 years, right? This whole point in time where you're going from how many different factors come into play to help to determine what path you take? Like, oh, oh my goodness, that's everything. This section kind of does that. I'll read a little bit. Involved in some form of developmental, and well, I'm back up saying, all were based on explicit theories, although these were very in nature, suggesting there's no one correct approach. All involved some form of parental capacities, resources, skills. Parent training was sometimes involved, family support. Let's see, it mentions multiple domains being involved. Children, the parents, the teachers, cognitive abilities such as IQ, social skills, attachment to family, schools, institutions, unity, all of those things. And so when you start outlining how many different areas you can overlap with this stuff, basically, almost any other theory if you really want to. From there, it talks a little about some quantitative and qualitative data. Okay. And the concepts and controversy sections, that's where they start talking a little about the difference between these two things. Here they say, developmental accounts, especially from developmental psychology, focus on regular law-like developments over the time of lifespan. When you start dealing with it here in ours, that's where you get that flexibility. Life course focus, recognize emergent properties, rejects metaphor of unfolding. I switched those, didn't I? Unfolding, developmental. Inextricably part of the developmental paradigm. Essentially what this is it is a time frame. There are so many factors involved that depending on what specific facets of this you want to deal with, it's going to be so varied that you got a lot of room to play with, right? You can focus on programs, you can focus on times, you can focus on any number of facets of it. Here. Then they talk about the directions. So propensity to commit crimes established before the age of 5. When we start dealing it here where it's more in that strict line, because that's where you start dealing with 5. Anything here, really anything, probably more like 8 and back. The predictive ability of that for future criminal behaviors is pretty high. If it's structured and set in one solid time frame, then of course you can here. Right? That's not how things develop. So there's all kinds of different ways to do it. Here they talked about the logical side of it, the impact of it. However, here it mentions you see that waned effect over time, though. So there are other factors that are coming into play. With that, like identifying the priority for what programs, what time, what factors are best are so difficult to identify. It's yeah, it's one of those things that what I would like you to do when you look at that kind of section is look at how they logically work through that section. So they start talking about here. Logical held from the history of this theory. We'll step back here. We do it here. As we see those lagged effects where, yeah, that criminal pathway, you went off from where you were going. As you do that, what you want to do is you want to look at start with directions, right? Positive, neutral, negative effects. So here's where that logic side will come in whenever you're developing projects, you're thinking about things in terms of like this, what we're doing here. Okay. If this happens here, what are the potential positive, negative, and neutral things could happen? No effect, it improves, it decreases, right? If it improves criminality here, what's going to be the next thing? You know, if it makes it worse, okay, that's going to set that person on that next path kind of thing. As you follow that, you'll see exactly, start identifying here that nuance, right? On the other hand, Sampson and Lobb, if they're correct in their arguments that childhood risk factors have modest predictive powers in adulthood. So from here to back here will predict most juveniles. Some people in adult, but it reduces effect. Well, best way to do it. Here's the thing. Situational factors and chance events are of much greater importance than previously believed in terms of understanding and life history. So basically that means our stuff here, everything that could intervene between here and there. It's fixed. And back here, this matters less. You see that decrease in time. Okay, let's start to identify the fact that this does matter. How much does it matter? Again. Okay. Developmental pathways. Here's where it talks about that. Not marked by one steady march towards adulthood. Occurs in a series of phases. They talk about transitions and what was the other points? That was actually the turning point. I think, what I was thinking. This we can find it real quick. Yeah, so you start dealing with those transitions rather than any set timeline. It doesn't work like biology. Not stages because it's unfolding. It's developmental, socially constructed. From there. Yeah, it starts going to some statistic stuff. I won't do that too much. We'll talk about, skip over that, Shoni Moffitt. And he talks to you about Skinner a little bit here because they start talking about reinforcements. Okay, interactions between individual and environmental factors suggest how we see these patterns is kind of cyclical. So they identify one of those cyclical cycles. Parents respond ineffective, and what you see there is that. Some cycles here. We talked about Skinner in here.
Not really.
Yeah. Comes up a little bit, not a whole lot. He's like learning. Different learning than our learning. Our learning is going to be socially related, always going to have those social elements. There is the actual process of learning. That's they call that differential reinforcement. Basically, what they start talking about are just reinforcement. You have differential reinforcement. That's more specific. This was reinforcement and punishment. Reinforcement's reward, punishment is in positive or negative. I can reward or reinforce a behavior I see by giving you something you want. It's positive. Or I can take away something you don't want. Right? You know, I don't want to be in a box. Could let you in a box. Right? I don't know. For mice and things, it's like you starve them for a little while and get more food. If I use rewards to train you, I can get new behaviors. If I use punishments, I can stop behaviors, create some new ones. Reinforcements will work over long periods of time, punishments do not. This whole process is governed by that learning process has to be a consistent one if you're going to learn how to interact. Your parental figures, it gives you got inconsistency here. What do you get? Well, first we're talking about what does inconsistency look like there?
Not providing the same punishments for the same actions.
So the severity, frequency, that kind of stuff can be all over the place. I don't know what quite to expect. Am I going to get punished for this? Am I not going to be punished at all? Oh, this is a beating. That kind of thing. You only learn this way. If you get inconsistency, you don't know how to put up with one. We don't know how to reconcile that. you didn't learn this behavior that you're trying to teach. That's if you're trying to teach a good behavior, right? Trying to punish a bad one, what ends up happening is they'll go away so long as that punishment's in effect. Like if there's an instance where that punishment will not be served, it's its own reward. And so it's kind of a nasty feedback cycle. Here they talk about it in terms of ineffective punishment reinforces the negative behavior of a child and increases it, right? I'm doing this absolute crap thing to get attention. Do I get it? No. Okay, what happens? I do more, right? Or if it's severe enough where it's just not gonna make any sense of it, it's like unpredictability or, you know, coping. And it's like, yeah, it's bad on both sides. Okay. So they had a longer one that wasn't talked about as much. Longitudinal study that talked about social environments and it studied it over time. But it's still, that's the hard one. Because we end up dealing with this. Okay. Don't worry about that part so much. With this. Whether you're talking a program, an intervention of some type, anything like that. Certainly parents here, it's like, parents are part of it. It's that whole social process is gonna be this as well. Okay. Just thinking about its effects and thinking about the sheer amount of time difference between these two things to see that they're having any effect at all whatsoever, it's amazing. Yeah, that's probably the big one. This is usually gonna be, for most things, a one-time thing, which is completely different than an all the time thing. The small inconsistencies, the small changes over time have massive effects. And it's very hard to be addressed through this, right? From a numbers perspective, what you're doing here is you've got one of these that has an effect that does this, or the inverse of that, and one of these that might do this. This is a much stronger curve than a straight line. The growth here is going to be much more powerful. So it's one of those things that just think about that in terms of that. That is amazing. Okay. From there, we'll talk about, I don't want to talk about, they go into a story about Jack. Did you guys read that? Yeah. I don't, it's a good story. What it does is they use a story, it's to highlight all the different points at which that person moved deeper and deeper into their criminal career. It is important, again, particularly with this area, because of its somewhat association with risk factors and that propensity scoring stuff, where you start getting into probabilities in the future. Keep in mind, this is not deterministic. That's actually one of the biggest issues with a lot of the theories that we have, is they act in a deterministic fashion. And you plug these into the equation, you get to see its relationship to what happened. Kind of deterministic, but keep in mind, this is kind of how we have to do it. So, yeah. Risk factors themselves can sometimes be that relate to politics and that kind of stuff. Area of potential abuse is basically what they start talking about there. When you're dealing with this, use that kind of stuff, or the risk factor stuff. That's a good way to start classifying people that are your problem people as a way to file them away kind of thing. What's a better way of saying that? There's about this. Let me think about that for a second. Let's see where we're abuses is basically what we're talking about there. But I said, from the practical side, we will see things quite directly, okay? I am a police officer in a high crime area. Because I'm in a high crime area, the number of things I need to justify a stop decrease because it's high crime. I also determine whether or not it's a high crime area by how many people I arrest in that area. There's a feedback loop there that can be abused. It's the same thing here, right? I identify you as at risk. I get to move you to at risk. And the fact that you're labeled as at risk inflates that negative to some degree. Because now, guess what? Not only have you been labeled as that at risk, social side, you're spending all your time with those at risk because those are the ones classified you as. So there's that whole negative side there that you need to be aware of too. And with that, I think that's sufficient for today. You guys want to call it a day? Have I kept you out long enough? Okay. Well, we'll pick up there. What we'll do is we'll talk about, because then here start talking a little about primary and secondary crime prevention. We'll also talk about tertiary because it's good to understand those levels, that aspect of it while we're talking about this, because it doesn't really go not too heavy into that yet. And with that, we'll pick up with I'll be putting out that assignment for probably a few pages for an introduction. Whenever you do that, I'll put out information related to formatting and that kind of stuff. Not a huge sticker for formatting, as long as I can tell where you're citing things from. The biggest one that you'll want to do is try to make sure you get academic articles that are peer reviewed. That's the big one. Because that's just a different subset of articles that's the one you guys need to focus in on. Sometimes people they'll get off the academic stuff and say, no, keep over it. But with that, we'll call it a day. All right?
Alrighty.
All right. Well, I will see you all next week. And have a great Valentine's Day. Enjoy the extra time. We'll start using that extra time next.
Dr. Hurst,
Yes.
can we, I'm gonna email you about a time we can meet to talk about our topics. I don't know if we've
Yeah.
already done it yet.
Did you send me an email already or no?
No, I think you asked about it in class. But
Yeah,
as far
so
as
I was asking about topics. If I were a little bit more ready for it, I would actually start writing those down, start shooting through those with you guys, but I'm not quite ready for it yet, just because I don't Valentine's Day. Yeah, you need that time.
Yeah.
So take that time, enjoy it, and we'll pick up the class next time. You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you.